Coming up in our newscast tonight. The first trilateral meeting between President Moon Jae-in and the Prime Ministers of China and Japan will be held next week. The Liberal leader will brief the duo on the outcome of the recent inter-Korean summit and the follow-through plans moving forward. The nation's top office flatly denied the U.S. troop station in South Korea were on the verge of being downsized, and statements from the Washington's Defense Department also reflect Changwade's remark. For the first time in almost 3 decades, the table tennis stars of Seoul and Pyongyang joined forces during an international tournament. Competing as one, Team Korea will be a force to be reckoned with. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea, live from Arirang Tower in Seoul. This is News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. Next Wednesday, President Moon Jae-in will embark on a one-day trip to Tokyo to attend the 7th trilateral meeting with the Prime Ministers of China and Japan. When he does, the Liberal leader would have completed presidential visits to South Korea's biggest partner nations. Moon Geon-young starts us off with the upcoming summit.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in will have completed presidential trips to all 4 of his country's most powerful partner countries, namely the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, in the first year of his presidency, when he touches down in Japan next week to attend the 7th South Korea-Japan-China Trilateral Summit. The president's economic advisor, Kim Hyun-chul, told reporters on Friday that the trilateral meeting on May 9th, the first to be held since November 2015 due to frosty relations between member countries, will serve as a venue for the South Korean leader to bring up to speed Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on the outcome of the inter-Korean summit and potential plans to implement the ambitious objectives laid out in the Panmunjom Declaration released last Friday. The 3 leaders are expected to issue a special declaration endorsing the inter-Korean summit and the landmark Panmunjom Declaration, which reaffirm the 2 Koreas' commitment on denuclearization and establishing lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. Moon, Abe, and Lee will also attend a business summit to encourage more businesses between the 3 countries, after which the leaders of South Korea and Japan are expected to hold a separate bilateral summit, followed by a luncheon hosted by the Japanese Prime Minister. The agenda of the trilateral summit will encompass various regional issues ranging from tackling fine dust and bringing down international roaming rates to ongoing diplomatic engagement with North Korea so that the 3 sides could better coordinate policy ideas. President Moon's bilateral summit with Prime Minister Abe will focus more on resuming shuttle diplomacy between the 2 neighboring countries and developing a future-oriented relationship. Mr. Moon's trip to Tokyo next week will be the first visit to Japan by an incoming South Korean president in 6.5 years, and Mr. Lee will become the first Chinese premier to step on Japanese soil in 8. Moon Geon-young, Arirang News, the Blue House.
Weeks ahead of the maiden meeting between the leaders of Washington and Pyongyang, there are reports of President Trump considering options of reducing the number of American troops stationed in South Korea. But according to our Kwon Jang-ho, Seoul's top office flatly dismissed such claims.
Seoul's presidential office has dismissed reports that U.S. President Donald Trump had requested plans to reduce American troop numbers in South Korea, describing them as not true. The Blue House's senior press secretary, Yoon Young-chan, released a statement on Friday saying that President Moon's national security advisor, Jong-un, who is currently in Washington, had discussed this report with a key member of the U.S. National Security Council, who flatly denied it, calling it groundless. The Pentagon refused to confirm the report, but a spokesperson said the Department of Defense's mission in South Korea remains the same and that their force posture has not changed. The New York Times on Thursday quoted several unnamed officials who said Trump had ordered the Pentagon to draw up such plans. The review is said not to be intended as a bargaining chip for North Korea's denuclearization in Trump's upcoming summit with Kim Jong-un, but it is being considered as an option if a peace treaty on the Korean peninsula is reached. Although the sources declined to confirm whether Trump was considering a full withdrawal, they said it was unlikely. Trump has long criticized the costs of stationing the 28,500 troops in South Korea, saying that Seoul needs to pay more towards those costs. In March, he even suggested during a fundraising speech that he wanted to pull out the troops in exchange for balancing out the trade deficit. Currently, South Korea pays around $820 million a year towards troop costs, about half of the total cost of stationing U.S. forces on the peninsula. But that amount is expected to increase, with Seoul and Washington currently in negotiations over a new deal. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in finally held his first phone conversation with his Chinese counterpart since the summit with Pyongyang. The Liberal leader explained to President Xi Jinping the outcome of the historic inter-Korean event, among other things. Hwang Ho-jun shares with us what was discussed during that phoner.
His first call was to U.S. President Donald Trump the day right after the summit. He then spoke with his Japanese counterpart, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and the following day with Russian President Vladimir Putin. But it wasn't until a week after the cross-border meeting that President Moon Jae-in and Chinese President Xi Jinping held their long-awaited phone conversation. President Xi had apparently been away from Beijing visiting the Chinese provinces. But with Friday's call, the Inter-Korean Summit and agreement now have the support of the leaders of all four of Korea's neighbors. According to a written statement from the Blue House, the phone call with President Xi lasted over half an hour. President Moon expressed his gratitude for China's support for the denuclearization of the peninsula and the Inter-Korean Summit itself, and asked for its continued concern, support, and contributions to ensure a successful Washington-Pyongyang summit. President Xi, in return, congratulated President Moon on the success of his summit with Pyongyang, as well as the announcement of the Panmunjom Declaration, saying the South Korean leader had played a paramount and positive role in the region. President Xi noted that China's State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Kim Jong-un on Wednesday in Pyongyang, and he said to President Moon that Kim is determined to improve inter-Korean relations, shut down his regime's nuclear facilities, and officially put an end to the Korean War. The South Korean and Chinese leaders pledged to boost their countries' close cooperation and communication, especially with the two Koreas ready to sign a peace treaty. Earlier in the day, President Moon spoke on the phone with his Canadian counterpart as well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, filling him in on the results of the summit. President Moon asked for Canada's support in working towards complete denuclearization and establishing lasting peace on the peninsula. Trudeau emphasized the two sides' friendship and vowed his country will do its part for peace. The PM also pledged to discuss Korea-related issues at the G7 summit set to take place in Quebec next month. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
A unified Korean table tennis team is on the verge of getting knocked out by Japan in a straight set shutout. They're in the third match of a best-of-5 at the semifinals of the World Team Table Tennis Championships in Sweden. Playing for the joint squad today are two South Korean players, Jeon Ji-hee and Yang Ha-eun, and a North Korean star, Kim Song-hee. Tokyo won the first two matches. Seoul's top-ranked star, Jeon, went down in a straight-set defeat to world number 7, Mima Ito. In the second match, Kim was edged out by Ishikawa Katsumi in full sets. If Team Korea loses tonight, they'll still get to stand atop the podium with a third-place finish. All 9 players will receive a medal, and both the South and North Korean national flags will be raised during the ceremony. The Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Unification, as well as Defense and Fisheries will visit the islands of Baengnyeongdo and Yeonpyeongdo this weekend. There, the officials will meet the residents and gather opinions about turning the area near a maritime demarcation line dividing the two Koreas into a peace zone in accordance with the Panmunjom Declaration. Park Ji-won has the full story.
It will be the first time that South Korea's heads of the Foreign Affairs, Unification, Defense, and Fisheries Ministries all visit Baengnyeongdo Island and Yeonpyeongdo Island, located just south of the Northern Lemon Line, a de facto maritime demarcation line in the West Sea between South and North Korea. The line was drawn in 1953 after the Korean War and had been respected by both Koreas until North Korea claimed a new maritime border back in 1999. South Korea's defense ministry officials said Friday that the four ministers plan to visit both islands on Saturday to meet the residents of the islands and to listen to their opinions about the part of the Panmunjom Declaration in which both Koreas agreed to devise a practical scheme to turn the areas around the Northern Limit Line in the West Sea into a maritime peace zone in order to prevent accidental military clashes and guarantee safe fishing activities. The Defense Ministry also plans to discuss ways to establish a peace zone near the Northern Limit Line in the West Sea during inter-Korean military talks, including the general-level talks slated for later this month. The areas near the Northern Limit Line in the West Sea have been a powder keg in inter-Korean relations. The first Battle of Yeonpyeong in 1999, the second Battle of Yeonpyeong in 2002, the Battle of Daecheon in 2009, and the South Korean warship Cheonan sinking in 2010 by a North Korean torpedo attack all took place in the region. Meanwhile, South Korea's defense ministry has organized a task force led by Defense Minister Song Young-moo and made up of key defense ministry officials and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as defense experts, to effectively carry out the Panmunjom Declaration. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
China's top diplomat traveled to Pyongyang, a strategic move to strengthen relations with the regime ahead of the North Korea U.S. summit. While Beijing seems to be very eager about this meeting, the Hermit Kingdom appeared rather calm. Oh Jung-hee sheds light on the possible reasons behind the contrasting attitudes.
It was the first visit by a Chinese foreign minister to Pyongyang in 11 years. Beijing's foreign minister and state councilor Wang Yi made a two-day trip to the North Korean capital this week, meeting with his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho and the North's leader Kim Jong-un. The objective, to discuss the outcome of last week's inter-Korean summit and, more importantly, to reaffirm China's position amid ongoing discussions on denuclearization and ending the decades-long armistice. Wang told North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that China hopes to strengthen strategic communication with North Korea, quote, in every aspect. And he told the North's foreign minister that China will continue to play a, quote, positive role.
China is a major party to the Armistice Treaty, which stands ready to have continued communication with the United States, South Korea, and other relevant parties.
China's foreign ministry was quick to brief the world on Wang's meeting with Kim Jong-un, immediately posting statements on its official social media account. Pyongyang state-run Korean Central News Agency, on the other hand, used formal expressions saying that there were in-depth discussions and hinted Kim and Wang had differences in views, writing they, quote, reconfirmed the views of North Korea and China. It appears as though Pyongyang is leaving room for development in relations with Washington.
If North Korea-US relations go on to dramatically improve, then North Korea will want to achieve a strategic balance between the US and China so that it can maximize its geopolitical value and obtain as much benefit as possible from both countries.
China has until recently called itself only a mediator of issues on the Korean Peninsula, meaning the North Korean nuclear issue is not its responsibility. But now Beijing calls itself a, quote, major relevant party. The recent change of rhetoric, experts say, comes as China feels the direct threat of being bypassed in the political turnaround. Washington can skip over China to directly negotiate with North Korea and even go further to reduce Beijing's influence in the region by normalizing ties with Pyongyang. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in's approval rating once again climbed above the 80% mark. According to a poll conducted by Gallup Korea, it's now at 83, a 10% jump from a week before. The rise can be attributed to the public's largely positive reaction to last Friday's Inter-Korean summit and the Panmunjom Declaration. The rating is just short of the Liberal leader's highest score of 84 last June, a month after he was elected into office. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea is still the top political bloc with an approval rating of 55. Up 3% from last week. Despite continuous meetings, an agreement between the rival parties to normalize parliament seems far away. A whole month was wasted in April, and it's been pretty much the same situation in the first week of May. Kim Min-ji has the latest from the National Assembly.
Despite another attempt to put an end to the paralysis, rival parties only reaffirmed their differences. The floor leaders of the country's major parties met with the Speaker of the National Assembly on Friday afternoon in hopes of reaching an agreement to end the month-long standstill.
I organized this meeting in a desperate manner. I'm ashamed and I apologize to the people. It's already very late, but we must normalize Parliament. I'm speaking for the people, not for myself.
But despite almost 2 hours of closed-door talks, the rival parties are still at square one. Currently, the biggest area of dispute is whether the ruling Democratic Party of Korea will accept an independent council probe into an online opinion-rigging scandal allegedly involving one of its lawmakers. Opposition parties have called on the ruling party to agree to a probe in exchange for getting things moving again. The ruling party indicated that it would accept their demand on 2 conditions. One, that the opposition agreed to ratify the Panmunjom Declaration reached at last week's Inter-Korean summit, and 2, that rival parties pass the government's extra budget bill. Those 2 conditions prompted the floor leader of the main opposition Liberty Korea party to go on a hunger strike until the ruling party agreed to accept the probe, no strings attached. It's unclear whether an agreement to normalize Parliament will be reached anytime soon, with rival parties so far apart. On top of that, the term of the ruling party's floor leader comes to an end next week, which doesn't give the parties a lot of time to achieve a breakthrough, and the standoff could linger until the new whip takes his or her seat. But while that's one side of it, there's also speculation that some sort of last-minute deal could come along, as failure to do so would add even further pressure on the National Assembly, especially having wasted a month in April, resulting in a growing stack of agenda items to go through. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Seoul Central Bank released its preliminary data on the country's balance of payments for March. It showed the service account deficit shrunk as more Chinese tourists visited Korea. Kim Hye-sung breaks down the digits for us.
South Korea's travel account deficit shrunk to its lowest level since April last year. According to the Bank of Korea, Friday, the travel account deficit narrowed to $1.31 billion in March thanks to a boost in Chinese visitors, which marked its turnaround with an on-year increase for the first time in about 13 months. The number of Chinese visitors in March went up nearly 12% on year to over 400,000 visitors. Boosted by the increase in Chinese tourists, the number of foreigners visiting Korea went up over 10% on year and 30% on month to 1.36 million people in March. Thanks to the falling travel account deficit, the services account deficit fell below $2.3 billion, the lowest since May last year. Korea's central bank said the increasing number of visitors was boosted by lower geopolitical risks following the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, as well as improving relations between Seoul and Beijing. The number of Chinese visitors to the country fell sharply last year due to China's travel ban over the U.S. THAAD deployment in South Korea. The current account balance logged a surplus of $5.2 billion in March, down from $5.7 billion a year ago, but still posting a surplus for 73 months in a row. The bank attributed the reduced surplus to a sharp increase in dividend payments to foreign investors of $2.8 billion last month. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
More bad news for the nation's steelmakers who endured a tough few years. South Korea will be unable to export select products to the United States this year because their import quotas have already been reached. Park Se-young sheds light on this discouraging development.
Some South Korean steel products could be sat unsold at home for the rest of 2018, as yearly U.S. import quotas aimed at protecting the domestic industry have already been hit. According to detailed customs clearance procedures recently revealed by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, South Korean steelmakers will not be allowed to export 8 out of 54 products to the world's largest economy. This is because the U.S. has set a yearly import quota of 2.63 million tons for South Korean steel products, or 70% of their average export volume between 2015 and 2017. The restricted products include steel pipe piles, cold-rolled stainless steel, and tool steel. According to figures measured on a customs-cleared basis, South Korean steelmakers exported products amounting to nearly 35% of the annual quota as of April 20th, with figures varying depending on the goods. In order to protect domestic companies, the U.S. has also set quarterly quotas on top of import quotas for the full year. To prevent the concentration of imports in a specific period, U.S. Customs and Border Protection has banned the import of steel products exceeding 30% of the annual quota for a quarter. This may pose a problem for South Korean steelmakers in the second quarter, as their shipments could again exceed the quarterly quota limit. South Korea's Commerce Ministry says it's discussing ways with the U.S. on how best to meet the quotas. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Following 3 days of zero trading, Samsung Electronics has returned to the nation's main bourse. This comes after the tech titan's decision in January to do a stock split. It ended below 52,000 won, pulling down the Kospi to close at slightly above 2,400. Cha Sang-mi reports from the Korea Exchange.
It was day one of Samsung Electronics shares being back on the market after the company split its stocks 50-1. Despite the high expectations, Samsung's share prices fell by over 2%, pulling down the benchmark Kospi. Some experts say this is probably temporary.
The drop today could have happened because there were many expectations on the stock uptick. This could be controlled, but there are concerns that Samsung's management will eventually deteriorate as the government seems to be exerting pressure on the board.
Whereas financial analysts say the fall on the first day is more relevant to the company's fundamentals and not necessarily the result of the stock split event. Korea's tech giant announced a 50-1 stock split in January, saying the decision would make investing in the company more accessible and provide dividends to a wider range of investors. Some analysts say Samsung's move will drive the stock price to re-rate the Korean stock market, given the fact that local investors will be much easier to access Samsung shares, which take up over 30% of Korea's stock exchange.
One share is almost 2,500 per share, which is an income, monthly income for a retail investor. So it's very difficult to approach the stock. So stock split will make a lot of local investors to be more in tune to invest into Samsung.
Yet some economists say, while it's almost no-brainer that for the next few days Samsung stock prices will shoot up, the impact is rather worrisome for the nation's stock market in the long run.
As the Samsung prices goes up and take a bigger share of the Korean stock market, that means the 30 to 40% of Korean stock market will be controlled by just one firm. So whenever Samsung has a bad turn, it'll make the entire Korean stock market unattractive.
The Economist warned Samsung Electronics' strategy could possibly distort the market and allow one firm to wield too much influence over the entire market. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
South Korea's Buddhist Mountain temples move closer to being added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. It was announced on Friday the International Council on Monuments and Sites officially recommended 4 temples be approved after Seoul submitted the application last year. They include Popju, Tongdo, Buseok, and Daehung temples. The final green light will be given when the World Heritage Committee meets in Bahrain in June. Once approved, they will join a list of other Korean World Heritage sites that include Changdeokgung Palace, Hwasong Fortress, and the Joseon Dynasty royal tombs. Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, it looks like mild and bearable conditions are back, albeit the strong winds. How is it looking for the extended holiday weekend?
Daniel, it's been a while since we had such favorable weather. However, it won't last long because smog is expected to flow into the nation again, blanketing the western and the central regions with bad levels of fine dust. Meanwhile, the wind will continue to blow as well, but it won't affect the temperatures as our daily highs will get a boost past the 20 degrees Celsius mark. Now, the same goes for Beijing and Tokyo. And tomorrow, Seoul will begin the morning at 11 degrees Celsius, while Jeju is very warm at 16 degrees. And into the day, Seoul will rise up to 23 degrees, while it's going to be hot over in Daegu and Gyeongju as they both reach up to 29 degrees. Here's the forecast for the 3-day holiday weekend. Most of the nation will receive rain over on Sunday, which will last until the evening. However, the southern regions and Jeju Island will get a lot more precipitation as rain clouds will linger until Monday morning. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have in store for you tonight. Thank you for watching. Have an incredible weekend.